My daughter didn't show up when the hospital contacted her about my heart attack. Instead, her fiancé shared a picture with a vicious tagline. Finally, a day without the drama king. Furious, I placed a single call and liquidated what they believed belonged to them. Who's the dramatic one now? Before we go on, please hit subscribe on the channel and drop a comment with the current time and your location. The beeping refused to let up. That constant electronic rhythm pulled me out of a void that was shadowy and buoyant. My eyelids scraped like grit on my corneas as I pried them apart. Pale ceiling panels, the scent of antiseptic blended with a metallic tang. Hospital, Mr. Little, you're awake at last. A nurse in uniform bent over me, her black hair tied in a tidy ponytail, her smile polished but her gaze carrying real compassion. The badge said Teresa Nguyen, RN, what occurred? My words emerged as a rasp. There was a tube in my arm, an IV drip leading to a pouch of transparent liquid. Where am I? Columbus Community Hospital. You suffered a heart attack at your job this afternoon. Teresa inspected a display next to my bed. Her fingers tapped keys out of my view. The EMTs got you here around midday. You've been out for roughly 2 hours. Heart attack. The phrase struck like icy water. I attempted to rise, but Teresa's soft touch eased me back. Take it slow. You have to recover. She drew a chair close to the bed. We reached out to your daughter, the one in your emergency contacts. Thank heavens. Wendy would arrive shortly, likely striding the corridor with that anxious scowl she wore whenever I had even a minor cough. She'd demand to stay overnight, dozing in one of those awful chairs hospitals claim are fine for relatives. She mentioned she was occupied and couldn't come. The machine's beeping appeared to falter. What? Teresa's composed demeanor wavered briefly. We described the circumstances, but she claimed she had prior obligations today. That's not possible. My chest constricted, unrelated to the heart issue. She has Thursdays off from work. It's her day for chores, handling the wash. The nurse's expression softened with the sort of sympathy I'd observed aimed at others. Never myself. I'm sorry, Mr. Little. Family sometimes handles health crises in unexpected ways. Shock impacts everyone differently. Shock, sure. That must be the explanation. Wendy was likely at home this instant, too frightened to get behind the wheel. She'd always disliked hospitals since her mom passed in one 3 years back. Perhaps she was phoning Jasper requesting he bring her. Maybe she was simply terrified. Could I? I motioned feebly to the nightstand. Could I have my phone? Teresa paused, then retrieved it from the drawer. Only for a short while. You truly need to relax. The device seemed weightier than normal in my grasp. Or perhaps my grip was just feebler. The display revealed 17 missed calls from the office, 4 from my buddy Silas, but 0 from Wendy. Not a single message inquiring if I was all right. The number you dialed was up to date, correct? Teresa rose, ready to depart. The one noted as your emergency contact. Yes. I gazed at Wendy's profile picture, her grinning from last Christmas in the crimson sweater I'd gifted her. That's certainly her number. Teresa lingered at the exit. I'll return to look in on you in an hour. Try to rest, Mr. Little. Your system requires time to mend. The door shut with a gentle snap, stranding me with the persistent beeps of equipment and an expanding emptiness that wasn't linked to my injured heart. I examined my phone once more, my thumb lingering over Wendy's entry. She always picked up by the second ring. Without fail. Maybe the hospital reached the wrong line. Maybe their records had an error. Maybe. I hit call. My digit trembled a bit as it tapped Wendy's name on the display. The IV yanked at my skin when I adjusted, a stinging cue of my situation and its cause. Ring 1, ring 2. She typically answered by now, often with her upbeat, "Hey Dad," that could lift even my gloomiest moods. Ring 3, 4, 5. It rolled to voicemail. Her recording from months earlier sounded remote. This is Wendy. Drop a message and I'll return your call. Wendy, it's Dad. My tone was firmer than my emotions. I'm at the hospital, Columbus Community, room 247. The docs say it was a heart attack. Please ring me back when you hear this. I ended the call and redialed right away. Same outcome. Voicemail. This round, I skipped leaving a note. Instead, I accessed texts, my fingers clumsily navigating the screen. The IV complicated matters and my chest throbbed with every shift. Had heart attack. In hospital, please call. Sent. The tiny confirmation mark popped up, showing it went through. I fixated on it, anticipating the ellipsis indicating she was replying. Zilch. Maybe her device was muted. Thursday was housekeeping day. She always noted the vacuum drowned out everything. She might be on the upper floor, headphones on, scouring the tub while tuned into those true crime shows she adored. She'd spot the alerts later, say in an hour or so, and then she'd freak out and hurry over. But Wendy never silenced her phone during daylight hours. "What if something happens to you, Dad?" She'd remarked just last month when I'd proposed she unplug from the endless pings. I composed another text. "Please reply. Scared?" The term looked tiny and pitiful on the display, but it was truthful. I sent it regardless. The minutes dragged on. I verified the message status. Delivered but unread. How could that be? Wendy was glued to her phone. Jasper constantly griped about it. Said she was hooked on social platforms and couldn't set it aside for even 5 minutes. My chest squeezed again, and the machine's beeping accelerated. I compelled myself to inhale deeply, as the heart specialist had instructed during my initial episode years prior. Merely stress, totally expected post-heart attack. I browsed my contacts for another option. Silas would show, but he was likely at a real estate viewing. My neighbor Jacqueline would arrive in 10 if I requested, but she'd demand to know why my daughter wasn't here already. Maybe I could contact Jasper straight. He might have insight on Wendy's location, a clearer reason, but an instinct halted me. If Wendy ignored my calls, there was a cause, and querying her spouse about her felt like breaching an unseen boundary. I launched Facebook instead. Wendy shared everything there. Breakfast pics, shots of their feline, gripes about the forecast. If she faced a dilemma blocking her from responding, she'd likely broadcast it. Her latest update was from Tuesday, an image of home-cooked lasagna captioned, "Testing a fresh recipe." 37 likes, 1 from me. Nothing afterward. No mentions of crises, no alerts about being swamped or tech glitches. Her page appeared standard, save for the notable quiet over the last couple days. I switched to Jasper's page, which I seldom visited. His content was typically snarky memes or rants about customers, but perhaps he'd posted a clue to why Wendy couldn't reach the hospital. His newest entry was from 2 hours back. The timestamp on Jasper's update chilled my veins. 1:47 p.m., precisely when I'd been hustled to the ER, as paramedics hoisted me into the rig while colleagues observed from the company lot. The image displayed 2 mixed drinks on what seemed their kitchen surface. Elaborate beverages with tiny parasols, the type Wendy chose for her birthday outings. Ice glistening in the midday glow through their pane. The caption, "Finally a day without the drama king." I gawked at the screen until my vision blurred. Read it once more. Captured a screenshot with shaky hands, unsure of the purpose. Drama king. They meant me, no doubt. Wendy never spoke of other theatrical folks in their circle. Her pals were all neighborhood parents who fussed over schools and traded cooking tips. The timestamp was undeniable. Uploaded at 1:47 p.m., as my heart had actually ceased for 37 seconds per the EMT who updated the ER staff. While I teetered on death, my daughter and son-in-law mixed drinks and toasted my non-presence. I scrolled to view the likes. Neighbors I'd assisted with lawn care. Wendy's university buddies who'd been courteous at reunions. Folks who knew me as Wendy's dad. And they chuckled with this barb about the drama king. How long had they mocked me privately? How many chats had unfolded out of earshot, depicting me as a load they endured? The phone slid in my clammy grip. I snagged it before it dropped, but my chest scorched now, a distinct ache from the attack. This burrowed deeper, seeping through my bones like venom. The hospital had notified Wendy, informed her of my heart attack, that I'd been unresponsive, that her dad could perish, and she'd claimed busyness because she wasn't occupied. She was liberated. Liberated to craft drinks and share quips about ditching the drama king. My fingers located the screenshot, enlarged those grinning reactions. Each felt like a blow. Wendy had educated me on emojis, devoted 20 minutes last year explaining their meanings. The tearful laugher signifies something hilariously funny, Dad. Truly hilariously funny. My heart attack was truly hilariously funny. I recalled every instance I'd supported them. The house down payment, $15,000 from my nest egg. The vehicle fixes I'd covered when Jasper's gig work stalled last season. The regular food hauls when Wendy's spine acted up. The endless occasions I'd abandoned plans at their beckon. Dad, can you mind the cat during our trip? Dad, the faucet's dripping. Can you mend it? Dad, we're tight on the power bill this month, and I'd done it willingly because that's parental duty. That's family. But to them I was merely a drama king. Someone whose health scare was a bother, whose brush with death warranted festivities. The drink glasses in the pic seemed pricey, likely purchased with funds I'd advanced for essentials last month. I fixated on the post until the text smeared, until the hospital room's slanting sunlight felt frigid as frost. Drama King. Finally, a day without the Drama King. The bedside monitor noted my escalating pulse, but I scarcely registered its alerts. All that resonated was the reverberation of phrases I wasn't meant to encounter. The reality I wasn't supposed to uncover. They weren't arriving. Not either of them. And for the first time in my 68 years, I was entirely, profoundly isolated. Drama King. The term ricocheted in my mind like an inescapable verdict. I placed the phone on the bedside stand, observing my hand quiver beyond the drug's effects. The IV line dangled with each motion, a synthetic nudge of how breakable it all was. When had Wendy last rung just to see how I fared? Not for cash, not for some urgent fix needing my time or funds, just to inquire about my day. I drew a blank. The machine's beeping grew more insistent, syncing with recollections I'd been too trusting to link. 6 months back, Wendy's tone on the line heavy with sobs. Dad, we're late on rent. The owner gives us 3 days or eviction. I know it's asking a ton, but you're our only kin now. $500. I'd headed to the bank that very day. 4 months on, another plea. Different mess. Same urgency. Jasper snagged this great gig. But payment comes post-completion. We can't buy food. Can you spot us? Just till the check arrives. $800 for supplies that endured no longer than prior months. My mouth felt parched. I grabbed the water cup by the bed, feeling how the plastic seemed alien on my lips. Everything here was alien, clean, built for crises, like the crises that drew my daughter to my doorstep more often. You get it, right, Dad? Mom always preached family first. That from 2 months ago. Wendy in my kitchen, eyes puffy, palm on the counter where Sarah once kneaded pie crust. With Mom past were it. She'd want you aiding us, wielding Sarah's legacy like a debit card. I'd handed over 200 then. Told myself it aligned with Sarah's wishes. The latest appeal resurfaced with stark sharpness. Last Tuesday, merely 6 days prior. It's short-term, Dad, swear. Once Jasper's venture soars, we'll repay all. You know we're reliable. Reliable, huh? In 3 years of interim aid, I'd recovered zilch. Yet each month ushered fresh interim woes, fresh justifications for why this was unique. This was the finale. I rubbed my palm's base against my brow. The IV tugged a tad, jolting my arm. How often had I justified their actions? How many warnings had I recolored with my frantic urge to trust my daughter needed her dad for more than his finances? The door swung open, Teresa entering, glancing at her watch. How are we faring, Mr. Little? Okay, I replied on autopilot. Just pondering. She approached the monitors, her attendance oddly soothing yet detached. Expert attention from an outsider while my kin reveled in my health ordeal with drinks and nasty jests. Your daughter phoned the front desk an hour ago, Teresa noted, jotting on her device. Inquired on visiting times. My pulse surged, the machine exposing me with faster tones. What did you say? That you were recuperating but steady. She sounded eased. Teresa eyed me with those empathetic looks that had conveyed too much grim tidings to too many clans. She'll likely stop by tomorrow. Tomorrow, when she'd enact the fretful daughter, pose the proper queries. Perhaps even tote blooms, the same blooms I'd doubtless fund somehow. I pondered that coffee tin in my kitchen. The spot for crisis funds. Had she dipped into that too? The extra key I'd provided was for real crises, I'd stressed. Health scares, home calamities, moments she genuinely required her father, not for retail sprees while I battled for breath. The insight struck like another cardiac event. I had to get home. I had to check what else she'd claimed, what further breaches happened as I lay senseless. For if she was bold enough to toast my admission, what was she bold enough to pilfer? Teresa wrapped her rounds and aimed for the exit. Try to unwind, Mr. Little. Tomorrow's packed with release forms. Release. Home. I held off until her steps receded along the corridor, then grabbed for the drawer holding my wallet and keys. The cab left me at the curb just shy of 10 the following morning. My home appeared identical externally. Same weathered azure shutters. Same mailbox leaning faintly left. Same fissure in the entry path I'd planned to mend for ages. But an oddness hit the instant I twisted the key. The interior air carried a subtle whiff of fragrance, not mine. Wendy's scent. The costly kind she couldn't swing but always sported. I placed my keys on the entry table, the spot I'd used for 23 years, and attuned. The place felt vacant now, but it hadn't been yesterday. Someone had roamed here handling my belongings. The family room seemed ordinary initially. Same battered leather armchair for nightly news. Same pile of technical magazines on the low table. But the vintage coin set I stashed behind the WP volumes was absent. 3 lineages of scarce coins, including a 1909 cent my grandpa bestowed when I was 12. My knees wobbled. From the attack or the find, hard to say. I proceeded to the kitchen, bracing on the wall. The coffee tin rested on its regular ledge, but shifted 3 inches left from my usual placement. I lifted the top with unsteady digits. $200 gone from the $400 for urgencies. She'd claimed precisely half, likely figuring I'd overlook it. Or perhaps she was indifferent to my noticing. I snapped a pic of the tin spot with my phone, then one of the void behind the books. Proof, an engineer's habit to record issues before addressing. The office door was ajar slightly. I never left it so. I nudged it wide and headed to my desk where vital docs resided in the lower drawer. The drawer wasn't shut tight, a slip I'd never ignore normally. Within, my folders had been sifted with the relaxed precision of one familiar with the layout. Birth records, coverage docs, asset reports, all present but jostled, inspected, appraised. She'd been hunting. The query was if she'd located it. My dad's watch vanished from the bedroom bureau. The Omega he'd donned daily for 40 years. The one he'd slipped off and handed me the day prior to his passing. Care for this, son, and care for your mom. I sank onto the bed, the springs groaning under me. The timepiece held little worth to outsiders, perhaps $300 at pawn. But to me it was invaluable, unique, and Wendy knew it. I toured the house anew, more deliberately, inventorying oversights. Minor items chiefly. A silver opener from the kitchen misc drawer, the fine ink pen from my workspace. Sarah's jewel case had been rummaged, though much remained. Wendy had selected only what simple to fence without scrutiny. She'd been systematic, nearly expert. This wasn't a frantic snatch for fast money. This was premeditated, deliberate. She'd had time to think about what to take, what would be missed immediately versus what might go unnoticed 4 weeks. While I'd been fighting for my life, hooked up to machines in a sterile room, my own daughter had been in my home, evaluating my possessions like a burglar. No, like an appraiser, like someone preparing for an estate sale. The thought hit me with sickening clarity. She hadn't just been stealing from me. She'd been preparing, learning what I owned, what it was worth, how to access it. This wasn't about temporary financial help anymore. This was about permanent solutions to her money problems. I made my way back to the kitchen and opened the canister again. Half the emergency money gone, but not all of it. She was being careful, pacing herself, testing how much she could take without triggering suspicion. But I was suspicious now. I was more than suspicious. I reached for my car keys from the hook beside the garage door. Time to have a conversation with my daughter. Time to see how well she could lie to my face when she didn't know I'd already discovered the truth. The drive to Oak Avenue would take 20 minutes. 20 minutes to decide what kind of father I wanted to be when I got there. Wendy's rental house looked shabier than I remembered. The front yard needed mowing, and the porch steps sagged slightly under their own weight. My own house, the one I'd worked 30 years to pay off, could fit this entire property in its backyard, yet somehow they still needed my money to survive. I parked at the curb and sat for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled. Through the front window I could see movement, Wendy walking past in what looked like a nice dress, not the clothes of someone who'd spent yesterday in crisis over her father's medical emergency. The front door opened before I even reached it. Dad. Wendy's face transformed into a mask of concern, so perfectly crafted it would have fooled me yesterday. Oh my goodness, how are you feeling? I'm so sorry I couldn't make it to the hospital right away. Why couldn't you answer your phone? I called multiple times. She stepped back to let me in, her hand fluttering to her chest in a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times when she was caught in childhood lies. I told the nurse my phone broke yesterday morning. I dropped it right on the kitchen sink, if you can believe it. The living room was cramped but clean, furnished with pieces that had clearly seen better days. Jasper's design materials were spread across a small table in the corner, but he was nowhere to be seen. When exactly did your phone break? I remained standing near the door, noting how she didn't offer me a seat or ask if I wanted coffee. Around 10, I think. I was doing dishes, being clumsy as usual. She laughed, but it sounded forced. You know how I get when I'm stressed about you, Dad. So, you knew I was in the hospital but couldn't come because of a broken phone? Well, no, not exactly. Wendy moved to the window, adjusting the curtains unnecessarily. The nurse called our landline. Did you know we still had on? I completely forgot about it. But by then she said you were stable and resting. I figured you'd want me to take care of practical things here, rather than just sit around a hospital room worrying. I watched her face as she spoke, noting the slight flush in her cheeks, the way her eyes didn't quite meet mine. Since when do you take care of practical things instead of worrying? Last time I had chest pains, you wanted to call an ambulance for heartburn. That was different, she said quickly. You know how you sometimes dramatize situations, Dad. I'm learning to assess things more rationally. Dramatize? There was that word again, the same one Jasper had used in his celebration post. The word they'd clearly discussed, planned to use if questioned about their absence during my crisis. Where's Jasper? I asked. Job interview downtown. Finally got a call back from that design firm I mentioned. She moved to the kitchen counter where I could see a brand new phone still in its packaging. The receipt beside it was time-stamped from this morning at 9:15 a.m. Interesting. Her phone had allegedly broken at 10 yesterday morning, but she'd only replaced it this morning, conveniently after the hospital drama had passed. Dad, are you okay? You look pale. Wendy approached with what appeared to be genuine concern, but I'd learned to question all her expressions in the past 24 hours. Just tired. Heart surgery takes it out of you. Of course it does. She touched my arm briefly, the gesture feeling performative rather than affectionate. You should probably get home and rest instead of driving around checking on everyone else. Everyone else. As if I made a habit of checking up on people after major medical events. As if this wasn't the first time I'd seen her since the hospital. The first time she'd bothered to look at me since I'd nearly died. I wanted to make sure you weren't too worried, I said carefully. I know how family emergencies upset you. I appreciate that, Dad, I really do. But you know how I am about hospitals. Ever since Mom, she trailed off, letting the implication hang between us, using Sarah's death as a shield, just like she'd used it to justify taking my money. Right, I said. Well, I should probably get going, let you get back to your day. Relief flickered across her face, quickly hidden but unmistakable. She wanted me gone. Had probably been checking the time since I'd arrived, calculating how long she needed to maintain this performance. Call me if you need anything, she said, walking me to the door with what seemed like a necessary speed. And Dad, try not to worry so much. You know how stress affects your heart? I paused on her front step, looking back at her framed in the doorway. Yesterday I would have seen a loving daughter concerned for her father's health. Today I saw something else entirely. I'll try to keep the drama to a minimum, I said. Her smile faltered for just a moment. What? Nothing, just something someone said. I turned toward my car, feeling her eyes on my back until I heard the front door close with a soft final click. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of her in my rearview mirror, already pulling out her new phone, probably texting Jasper that the old man had bought her story, that the crisis had passed, but the crisis had only just begun. The drive home felt longer than usual, every red light giving me another moment to replay Wendy's performance. I pulled into my driveway and sat there for several minutes, engine ticking as it cooled, watching the afternoon shadows stretch across my lawn. My chest still ached, whether from the heart attack or from something deeper I couldn't tell anymore. Getting out of the car required more effort than it should have. The medication made me feel disconnected from my own body, like I was operating heavy machinery I didn't fully understand. I fumbled with my keys, muscle memory guiding me toward the front door. Hiram. Jacqueline Garza's voice carried across the narrow strip of grass between our driveways. She was hurrying over from her front yard, where she'd clearly been waiting for my return. At 50, Jacqueline had the kind of restless energy that made her the unofficial neighborhood news service. Thank goodness you're all right. When I heard about the hospital, I was so worried. You heard about that? I turned to face her, noting the eager gleam in her eyes that always appeared when she had information to share. Well, your Wendy's been telling everyone about your heart attack. Jacqueline's expression shifted slightly as if she was choosing her words carefully. She seemed, well, not as worried as I'd expect a daughter to be. Something cold settled in my stomach. What exactly has she been saying? Oh, honey, I probably shouldn't repeat neighborhood gossip. But she glanced around as if checking for eavesdroppers, then leaned closer. She and that husband of hers have been talking about how your heart is failing, how you probably don't have much time left. The keys bit into my palm where I was gripping them too tightly. They said that not in so many words, but the implication was clear, and Jacqueline's voice dropped to what she probably thought was a whisper. They've even been discussing what they'll do with this beautiful house when they inherit it, planning changes, talking about selling it for the lot value. I thought it was terribly premature, but Jasper said something about your weak ticker, making it a matter of when, no tiff. The world seemed to tilt slightly. I reached out and gripped the car's doorframe, steadying myself against more than just physical weakness. When did you hear this? Just yesterday morning, actually. I was getting my mail when they walked by, taking their usual stroll through the neighborhood. You know how they like to look at the nicer houses. They were discussing square footage and property values like they were already measuring for furniture. Yesterday morning, while I was unconscious in a hospital bed fighting for my life, my daughter and son-in-law had been taking inventory walks through my neighborhood, planning my estate sale. I hope I haven't upset you, Jacqueline continued, clearly recognizing that something was wrong with my expression. I just thought it was odd timing. You know, most children would be focused on their parents' recovery, not well. Other things. No, I appreciate you telling me. The words felt like they were coming from someone else's mouth. I should probably get inside and rest. Of course, you look exhausted, poor thing. Let me know if you need anything. Groceries, rides to appointments, anything at all. She patted my arm with genuine kindness, completely unaware that she just delivered the final blow to whatever remained of my relationship with my daughter. I managed to wave goodbye and walk toward my front door without stumbling. Behind me, I heard Jacquine's footsteps returning to her own yard. Probably already composing the stories she'd tell her next victim about how pale and shaken Hiram Little had looked when she'd shared the neighborhood news. The key turned easily in the lock, but everything beyond that simple action felt impossibly complex. I stepped into my house, the house Wendy and Jasper had already parceled out in their minds, the house they'd discussed selling before my body was even cold, and closed the door behind me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I was truly alone with the complete picture of my daughter's betrayal, and for the first time in my 68 years I understood exactly what needed to be done. By 8 that evening, I'd moved through my house like a ghost haunting his own life. The Halliton sandwich on my kitchen counter had grown stale, but I couldn't summon any interest in food. Every room held evidence of the sacrifices I'd made, the love I'd given, the trust that had been systematically exploited and betrayed. Sarah's portrait smiled down from the mantelpiece. The same gentle expression that had comforted me through 3 years of widowhood. What would she think of our daughter now? What would she say about the woman Wendy had become, or perhaps had always been beneath the surface? I remembered Sarah's words from Wendy's wedding day. She's beautiful, isn't she? But Hiram, promise me you'll be careful. Sometimes I worry that she sees kindness as weakness, generosity as stupidity. I'd laughed it off then. Sarah was just being protective, maybe a little jealous of sharing our daughter with Jasper. But Sarah had seen something I'd missed, some fundamental coldness that I'd explained away as independence, strength, modern thinking, the college tuition I'd paid when my retirement account took its biggest hit, the wedding expenses when Sarah was already sick and medical bills were mounting, the endless stream of emergencies that required immediate financial intervention. Each time Wendy had made it seem like I was the hero, the savior, the irreplaceable father who always came through. But I wasn't irreplaceable at all. I was just useful, a walking ATM with a sentimental streak and a weak heart. Moving to the window, I looked out toward Oak Avenue, though I couldn't see Wendy's rental house from here. She was probably there right now, maybe on the phone with Jasper, discussing how suspicious I'd seemed during our conversation. Were they worried that I'd figured something out, or did they assume I was still the same naive fool who'd been bankrolling their lives for years? The neighborhood gossip Jacqueline had shared played on repeat in my mind. Planning changes to my house, discussing property values, calling my heart a weak ticker and debating when, not if, it would finally give out completely. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were counting on it, planning for it, depending on it to solve their financial problems permanently. I walked to my study and pulled out the filing cabinet where I kept important documents. House deed, insurance policies, investment statements, all the papers that represented a lifetime of work, saving, and careful planning. All the assets that Wendy assumed would flow to her like some inevitable inheritance. But inheritance required death, and despite what my daughter and son-in-law might have hoped, I wasn't dead yet. Sitting back in my leather chair, I felt something shift inside my chest. Not physical pain this time, but something harder and colder, settling where trust and love used to live. If Wendy could be practical about my death, I could be practical about my life. She'd taught me the rules of this new game we were playing. Money was more important than love. Planning was more important than grief. Self-interest trumped family loyalty every single time. Fine. I was a quick learner, especially when the lesson involved engineering problems. And this was ultimately an engineering problem. How to redistribute resources in a way that achieved the desired outcome. The desired outcome was justice. The resources were everything I'd worked for, everything I'd saved, everything Wendy assumed would be hers to inherit. Outside night had fallen completely. The house felt different now, less like a home and more like a tool. The most valuable tool in my arsenal for teaching my daughter that some assumptions come with a price. I pulled out my address book, the old-fashioned kind with handwritten entries and smudged phone numbers. Silas Burton's information was right where I'd written it 15 years ago, complete with his home and office numbers. Tomorrow morning I'd make a call that would change everything. Tonight, I'd sleep better than I had in years, knowing that for once in this relationship I'd be the one setting the terms. Wendy wanted to plan my funeral. Instead, she was about to attend the burial of her financial future. Saturday morning came with unexpected clarity. I'd slept 7 solid hours more than I'd managed since Sarah died. No anxiety dreams, no chest pains in the middle of the night, just the deep, restful sleep of a man who'd finally stopped fighting against the truth. Coffee tasted better than it had in days. Even the simple act of buttering toast felt purposeful rather than mechanical. I was moving through my morning routine with the focused efficiency of someone preparing for an important meeting, because that's exactly what I was doing. Silas Burton's business card sat propped against the sugar bowl where I'd placed it the night before. He'd been after me to sell this house for the better part of a decade, always with the same argument. Too much space for one person? Too much maintenance, too much equity sitting dormant when I could be liquid and mobile. I'd always said no, of course. This was the house where Sarah and I had built our life together, where Wendy had taken her first steps, where Christmas mornings had echoed with laughter and wrapping paper. You don't sell memories, but memories weren't paying for Wendy's cocktails while I fought for my life. Memories weren't funding her shopping trips through my neighborhood, calculating property values. Memories weren't protecting me from my own daughter's greed. At exactly 9 now, I dialed Silas's home number, Burton residence. His voice was crisp, professional, even on Saturday morning. Silas, it's Hiram Little. I hope I'm not calling too early. Hiram. The warmth in his voice was immediate and genuine. Never too early for an old friend. How are you feeling? I heard through the grapevine about your hospital stay. I'm recovering well, thanks. Actually, that's part of why I'm calling. I took a steadying breath. Remember how you've been telling me to sell this house? A pause. Then for about 10 years running, yes. Are you finally ready to listen to reason and downsize? Something like that. How quickly could you move on a sale if I were serious about it? In this market, Hiram, I could have 3 families bidding against each other by Tuesday. Your neighborhood is gold right now. Young professionals moving out from the city center. Families wanting established areas with character. His excitement was building with each word. But are you sure about this? It's a major decision. I'm sure I need cash, Silas. How fast can you make that happen? Cash sale? Well, that depends on the buyer. But I know investors who could close within a week if the property's clean, which yours absolutely is. I've been watching you maintain that place like a museum piece for decades. He paused, and I could almost hear him shifting into business mode. What kind of timeline are we talking about here? 1 week, maybe less if possible. Hiram, what's the urgency? If you don't mind me asking. Usually when someone wants to sell their family home that quickly, let's just say I've had some revelations about family priorities lately. I want to make sure my assets go where they'll do the most good while I'm still alive to see it happen. Silas's tone suggested he understood more than I was saying. Well, you won't get any arguments from me about that philosophy. And frankly, you're sitting on a gold mine. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, that beautiful original hardwood, the mature landscaping. In this market, we're talking serious money. How serious, ballpark? 400,000, maybe 450 if we get a bidding war. The lot alone is worth nearly half that much. Developers are snapping up properties in your area. $400,000, more than enough to disappear completely. To start over somewhere Wendy would never think to look. More than enough to ensure that her inheritance plans became academic, rather than practical. When can we get started, I asked. I can be over this afternoon with the paperwork. We'll need photos, a professional assessment, maybe some minor staging recommendations. But Hiram, once we list this thing, there's no backing out. The market moves fast. I'm counting on it. All right then, this is exciting, friend. You're going to love the freedom that comes with cutting loose from all that responsibility. Where are you thinking of relocating? I looked around my kitchen at the window where I'd watched Sarah tend her garden, at the breakfast nook where Wendy used to eat cereal before school. In a week, none of it would be mine anymore. In a week, Wendy's inheritance would evaporate like morning fog. I haven't decided yet, I said, but somewhere far enough away to start fresh. Perfect, I'll see you at 2 o'clock sharp. And Hiram, you're doing the right thing. Life's too short to be tied down by property when you could be out there living it. After I hung up, I sat perfectly still for several minutes, listening to the house settle around me. Somewhere across town, Wendy was probably planning her day, maybe discussing with Jasper how long they'd have to wait for their windfall, maybe calculating monthly payments on the debt they'd run up in anticipation of my death. They were about to learn that anticipation and reality were two very different things. At 2 down, my house would officially go on the market. By next weekend, it would belong to someone else entirely, and by then I'd be gone. Not dead as my daughter had hoped, but free in a way I hadn't been since I'd first decided that being a good father meant being a foolish one. The phone rang in my hand, startling me back to the present. Wendy's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring. The week that followed my call to Silas moved with the precision of a well-engineered machine. Monday brought document signings at his office. Tuesday saw the first showing, and by Wednesday we had serious buyers. The Stanleys, Waldo and Lori, with their 4-year-old daughter Emma, fell in love with the house the moment they walked through the front door. Mr. Little, this house has been so beautifully maintained, Waldo said, running his hand along the original crown molding in the living room. His wife was already in the kitchen, opening cabinets and admiring the vintage tile work Sarah had chosen 20 years ago. You can tell it's been truly loved, Lori added, peering out the window at the backyard where Emma was already spinning in circles on the grass. Emma would have so much space to play here. Room for a swing set, maybe a garden. I watched the little girl through the window, remembering when Wendy had been that age, when she'd played in that same yard with the same innocent joy, before money became more important than love, before manipulation became second nature. The neighborhood is perfect for families, I told them. Good schools, quiet streets, neighbors who actually care about each other. The inspection on Thursday revealed minor issues. A loose shutter, some weather stripping that needed replacing, nothing that would slow down the process. By Friday, we were sitting in the closing attorney's office signing papers that would transfer ownership of my family home to people who deserved it. Silas handled the technical details with his usual efficiency, but I caught him watching me with concern during the more emotional moments. When the attorney slid the cashier's check across the table, $435,000, more than I'd ever imagined the house was worth, my hand was steady as I accepted it. I've never seen a sale move this smoothly, Silas murmured as we gathered the papers. Are you absolutely certain about this decision? I've never been more certain of anything in my life. The key ceremony took place on the front porch with Emma dancing around her parents' legs while I handed over the house keys. Such a simple gesture, metal changing hands, but it represented the complete transformation of my life. We'll take wonderful care of it, Lori promised, accepting the keys with both hands like they were made of crystal. I know you will, I said, and meant it. This house deserves to hear children's laughter again. Later, after the Stanleys had driven away to begin planning their move, I stood alone on the sidewalk looking at the house that was no longer mine. The late afternoon sun caught the windows just right, making them glow like warm amber. Sarah would understand this decision. She'd always said that houses were meant for living, not just existing. My phone buzzed with a text from the hotel where I'd been staying. Room confirmed for another week while you finalize relocation plans. Perfect. By the time Wendy discovered what had happened, I'd be long gone. By the time she realized her inheritance had evaporated, I'd already be building a new life somewhere she'd never think to look. I got into my car, the same car I'd driven to the hospital 8 days ago as a naive father who trusted his daughter's love. The man driving away from Elm Street was someone entirely different, someone who'd learned that sometimes the only way to win the game is to change the rules completely. In my rearview mirror, I watched the Stanleys' car pull up to their new home. Emma's excited face pressed against the window. The future belonged to families like theirs, honest, hopeful, genuinely caring about each other. The past, with all its lies and manipulations and calculated betrayals, belonged to someone else now. Sunday morning arrived with unseasonable clarity, the kind of bright sky that makes everything look sharper than usual. I was finishing coffee in my hotel room when the phone rang. Wendy's name on the screen made me smile for the first time in over a week. Dad. Her voice was tight, controlled, dangerous. We need to talk right now. Good morning to you too, sweetheart. How can I help you? Don't play games with me. I just drove by the house. There are strangers in our yard, Dad. Strangers with moving trucks and children's toys. What did you do? I sold it yesterday, actually. Lovely family, the Stanleys. They'll take much better care of it than you sold our house without telling me, without discussing it with family. Her voice was climbing toward hysteria, each word sharper than the last. My house, Wendy, my name was on the deed. And yes, I sold it for quite a bit more than I expected, thanks to the market. Meet me there right now. We're going to fix this. 20 minutes later, I parked across the street from my former home and watched the scene unfold. Wendy was on the front lawn, gesturing frantically at Waldo Stanley, while his wife held Emma protectively behind her. Even from a distance, I could see the confusion on their faces, the way they kept looking toward their new house as if questioning their own right to be there. I crossed the street with measured steps, my heart rate steady for the first time in days. Wendy, my voice cut through her tirade. Step away from these nice people. She spun toward me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in my daughter's face. Pure, undiluted rage mixed with genuine fear. Dad, tell them this is a mistake. Tell them you're not competent to make these decisions. Tell them, Mr. Little. Waldo stepped forward, his arm around his wife's shoulders. Is there some kind of problem we should know about? No problem at all, I said calmly. Just a family disagreement. My daughter seems to have forgotten that children don't inherit property until their parents are actually dead. Wendy's face went white. You can't do this to us. We had plans. We were counting on my death. Yes, I heard about your plans. Jacqueline mentioned how you and Jasper were discussing my timeline with the neighbors. Something about my weak ticker and property values. She opened her mouth, then closed it, the calculation visible in her eyes as she tried to find a new angle of attack. We're going inside, Lori Stanley said quietly to her husband. Emma, come on, honey. They disappeared through the front door that had been mine yesterday morning, leaving Wendy and me alone on the sidewalk. You don't understand the pressure we're under, she started, but I held up my hand. Stop, just stop. I looked at this woman who shared my blood, who'd once been my greatest joy, who'd systematically betrayed every kindness I'd ever shown her. I saw Jasper's post, Wendy. While I was in the hospital fighting for my life, he was celebrating a day without the drama king. You told the hospital you were too busy to come, too busy to check on your dying father. Her mouth worked soundlessly for a moment. You're twisting everything. You're being dramatic. I smiled and she flinched. That seems to be your favorite word for me lately. Well, here's some drama for you. I'm alive. I'm healthy. And I'm not waiting around for your inheritance timeline anymore. You can't just cut us out. I'm your daughter. You cut yourself out the moment you decided my death was more valuable than my life. I turned toward my car, then paused. Oh, and Wendy, next time you plan someone's funeral, make sure they're actually dead first. She stood there on the sidewalk that was no longer hers, in front of the house that would never be hers, looking smaller and more powerless than I'd ever seen her. No more manipulation, no more crocodile tears, no more emotional blackmail using her mother's memory. Just a greedy woman who'd gambled everything on her father's weakness and lost. I drove away without looking back, leaving her to explain to Jasper how their foolproof inheritance plan had just evaporated in the spring sunshine. 3 months later, I sat in my Cincinnati apartment watching the Ohio River flow past my window, coffee growing cold in my hands as I considered the strange turns life can take. The place was smaller than my old house, but infinitely more peaceful. Modern, efficient, mine by choice rather than by accident of marriage and parenthood. The calendar on my kitchen counter showed June 15th, Wendy's 36th birthday. I'd kept this tradition for 36 years, calling her every birthday morning, usually to arrange dinner or a gift exchange. This year felt different. This year, the call was about maintaining boundaries rather than expressing love. She answered on the 4th ring. Hello, Dad. Her voice was carefully neutral, professionally polite. We'd spoken twice since the house sale, once when she'd tried bringing Jasper to guilt me into doing the right thing, and once when she'd called crying about their financial struggles. Both conversations had been brief. Happy birthday, Wendy, thank you. How are you managing? A pause, then we're fine. No thanks to you. I'm glad to hear you're doing well. I meant it surprisingly. I won't keep you long. I know you're busy, Dad. She started to say something, then seemed to think better of it. Is that all? I looked around my apartment at the books I was reading for pleasure instead of necessity, at the fishing gear I'd bought for weekend trips to the lake, at the absence of family photos that had once cluttered every surface. Peace looked different than I'd expected, but it felt exactly right. Just one more thing, I said. Try not to be so dramatic, sweetheart. Silence stretched across the line for nearly 10 seconds. Then she hung up without saying goodbye. I set the phone down and returned to my coffee, which had somehow stayed warmer than expected. Through the window, a young family was walking along the riverside path, parents pushing a stroller, older child running ahead with a kite. They looked happy in the uncomplicated way that Wendy and I had never quite managed. The drama king had abdicated, I thought, watching the kite catch the wind and soar higher. Long live the quiet king. For the first time in 68 years, I was exactly where I chose to be, with exactly the people I chose to have in my life. The inheritance Wendy had planned on was gone, but she'd inadvertently given me something far more valuable, the knowledge that I didn't need to be anyone's victim, not even my own daughter's. I picked up the newspaper and turned to the crossword puzzle, humming softly to myself. Outside, the river kept flowing toward whatever came next, carrying away everything that no longer served the journey. Sometimes the only way to save a relationship is to end it. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the opportunity to succeed or fail on their own merits. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you discover that the life you thought was ending was actually just beginning. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.